Good morning, all. Myself Chandra, and in this session, we will discuss about the file connector. And first of all, we will see what is file system. So, file system is the physical location of the machine. So, whenever we say it is the system, so within system, we need to provide the physical location, like there will be folders and files, right? So, within the system. So, in the same manner, we can create these folders and files by using the file connectors. So we need to provide on which location we have to read the file or on which location we need to write the file. So the activities that we are doing in our machines or in our systems by using the right click and creating the file and saving the files. So these operations, we can do it from the Mulesoft connectors and Mulesoft flows as well. And basically, streaming means whenever there are large content or large payloads of files. So instead of loading them into the Mulesoft memory, we can mention it as a streaming files. So that means it is a large content file. So instead of loading into memory, we can process them into a different way. First, we need to understand, we have seen that JSON data format, XML format, and text formats and CSV formats. So mainly the data files, whenever we want to read the files from the file systems, right? So it will be CSV format or text file formats rather than the JSON formats. So there might be scenarios where we need to read the files which are in the form of XML format or JSON formats as well. And in this session, we are going to mainly talk about the CSV format and how we can read those files and how can we write the files. So within the CSV format, we need to know that there will be headers. So header means it is like representing the data in the form of header and rows. So that means whenever we are creating the files, so we have to specify if there are anything headers for the record, like supplier name and supplier number example. So we need to specify that as a column names within the file, and then we have to create records with the information. What is the supplier name and what is the supplier number for the multiples of records. And we also need to specify that quotes. So quotes means what will be the quote value that we have to enclose. So it can be a double quote or slash or colon. We can specify these quote values as well. If we do not specify the quotes value, then it is going to defaultly consider the double quotes as a quotes keyword. And we need to specify quote values as well. So these quote values, if we mention it, quote values true or false, that means it is going to enclose the column values or column data within the quotes. So that means whatever the quotes that is going to be defined here. So by using that quotes value, the field or data will be enclosed. And we can also specify the separation or separator. So we will be having multiple columns information like supplier number and like supplier name and supplier number, right? So here, if we are going to specify the separator, then it is going to use that separator and then it will separate the fields or columns data. If we do not specify, it is going to by default consider the comma as the separator between the columns. And whenever we have this comma separated value in a single column value, then we need to specify the data within the double quote. So when there are chances that the content of the data is going to contain the commas also within the information, then we need to write the separator and also the quote values to enclose the data. So basically, to understand what is file connector and how we are going to perform the operations, here are the examples like So file connector will be used to read or write files from system or to system to file system respectively. And by using file connector, we can also list the files or folders in that particular system location. And we can use this file connector to move the files and also to delete the files. And unfortunately, this file connector we cannot use within the Cloud Hub. That means once we build the application by using file connector operation, that API we are unable to deploy into the Cloud Hub because that file connector service will not work within the Cloud Hub, because the Cloud Hub is managed by the Mulesoft, and Mulesoft is going to deploy the applications on the workers and within the data centers. So we won't be able to know what is the physical location of that particular workers or machines. And hence, we won't be able to use the file connector within the Cloud Hub deployments. And instead of using the file connector for Cloud Hub deployments, we can have other alternatives like SFTP connector or FTPS connectors. Okay, this is our use case. One second. For the file connector operations, we need to provide few configuration properties like path. So from which path or to which path and which folder location we wanted to read or write the data and write the files. To read or write the data or files, we need to specify the path. And this path will contain a syntax with the file name and also the directory. So syntax will be like, there will be a directory or path name, and then the last field that we are going to provide will be a file name. So we need to be careful while providing this path and the location. And here are the examples. And we need to provide the directory name, and after that we need to provide the file name. And if we want the file name extension to be something, then we can represent the extension as well. And we will see write operation properties. So by using file connector, we can write the files into a physical location of your system. So whenever we want to write the data in files and place it on a particular location, we need to configure few properties like there will be write mode. So basically this create new operation will be used to create the new files. And once the file is created with that particular file name and the particular location, so we cannot reuse the same operation. It is going to throw an exception, like the file was already available. We will see that in action. Okay. And there is one more write mode of property like override. So override property will be used if we don't want the previous data or previous files information, and every time we wanted to replace that content or data with the new information, then we can use the overwrite operation, so that if there is any file with that particular file name on that particular location, then it is going to replace that content in the file with a new information. And there is one more write mode operation like append. So append is going to work only if the file is already available on the particular location. And it is going to add the content to the existing data or to the existing records. For example, in a file, there are already 4 records, and you want to add the records into the existing file, then it is going to keep that 4 records, and the newly added records will be keep on adding into that file instead of replacing the content. And we have one more property like create parent directories. That means particular path we are going to provide the directory as well as the file name. If we are going to provide this create parent directories as 2, then it is going to search for the directory within that path. And if any of the directory is not available, then it is going to create the particular directory and it will continue the process. If the create parent directories property is set as false, then the operation will be failed if the directory is not available in the location. And we also need to specify the content, what kind of data we wanted to write into a file and store into the file. And to write the content, we can use the data view transformation. And another operation is read operation. So read operation is going to read a file from the specified location or physical location, and this operation we can add in between the flows. So we are going to define the flows, right? So within the flows, we cannot add this as the source endpoint, and we need to use this within the flow. I mean to say within the message processors, and we have to set the file path for this. And file path is like from which location we wanted to read the file and process it. We also have to specify MIME type if it is necessary. And if we wanted to specify that what kind of data it is going to represent and how to process that particular data. There is one more operation by using the file connector. Like whenever a new file is added to that particular location, or if that file existing file is updated, then we wanted to read the file again. Then we can use the on new or upload file. And this operation can be done as a source endpoint. So we can add this as a source endpoint, and it is going to trigger the rest of the flow. We have few properties for the configuration like matcher. So by using matcher, it is going to work as a filter condition, like which files we wanted to process. And we can also specify certain properties and matching conditions, like based on the creation date and also updated date, and based on the specific file formats, whether we wanted to process CSV data files or .txt files. So those kind of information we can provide within the matching conditions. And we have one more property like watermark property. So by using watermark property, we can avoid processing of the same files. Once file is processed, and if we don't want to process the same file, then we can use the watermark, and within the watermark, we can configure the properties like last updated date or last creation date. So it is not going to pick the same files again and again. We can also configure the scheduling strategy when the flow has to be triggered and when the file operation can be performed to pick up the files or to check for the files. So we can mention in 2 ways. One is fixed frequency, and another one is by using cron expression. So within the fixed frequency, we need to mention like whether we have to run the check for every 15 minutes or 30 minutes or even one day like that. And we can have cron expression. So cron expression is like we need to mention there are expression seconds, minutes, hours, month, and day of week. Here is optional. So we have to specify on which day or at which minute, and also on which day of the week this check can happen and this flow can be triggered. So these kind of expression we can configure by using cron. Cron expression will represent like every day at 10:15 a.m. the cron job has to be scheduled and run for 10:15 a.m. Likewise, we can provide the cron expression. We also have the post-processing actions. So post-processing actions is like once we have read the file from the location and it is processed successfully or whether it is failed. So based on that, we wanted to do some more action. Like if we want to move the file or we want to delete the file or whether we need to rename the file and move it to a different directory. So these kind of actions we can perform. And also we have one more property like whether we wanted to continue with this process even though the process of the file operation is failed or not. For example, apply post action when failed. So we have this configuration. If it is set to true, that means even the file process is failed, then we are going to perform these actions. Like we can delete the file or we can move the file to a different directory. But if we are going to set the post processing action when failed to false, then we are not going to perform any of the other actions or post processing actions. We are going to stop the process for post process action. So this is about the theoretical process, and we will jump into the use cases. So basically, why do we need these file operations and where we are going to use? So not every application or every system is going to connect with the database or they are going to provide the services in REST services. So there will be a limitations for that particular application or system. So in order to achieve or fit into the business needs, we need to communicate or transfer the data from one of the system to other system by using file protocol, file communication. So in that case, we have to extract the data from system A and that system A data needs to be transformed or structured into a different format, and then that data we are going to put in a file and the file will be placed into a certain location. And so the system B is going to pick up that file and they are going to process in their application. So in this way, we can build the integration by using Mulesoft. So in order to transform the data and also extract the data from system A to system B, we are going to build a MuleSoft integration service. And in this service, we are going to fetch the data and transform it. So we will see the first use case. So we have the supplier's information in a database, and that supplier information we wanted to give it to the system B. We're going to use the physical locations of your system and we will write the data into your folders. So I'm moving into the one more thing. For the cron expression, there are Oracle documents like how we can represent the data. Yeah, this one. So for, we have cron tab and there are many websites. So you can go and check for the cron, how we can represent the cron expression and what does that mean, cron expression. And these are the some examples. Like it is going to fire at 12 p.m. every day. Now we are going to create a integration for database to file system. Go to connectors API, create a new mule configuration file, read, upload operation. I'm going to create a few folders within the source main resources. So folder name is like file. And within this file, I want to create few more folders. One is in, create one more folder under a file, out, and archive. So we are going to add a flow. For that, we can use the HTTP listener. And here we are going to provide the information like file, write, suppliers. And I'm going to refer the existing flow, which is going to provide the information for database suppliers. And then I want to write the information into a file. So for that, I need a file name and the directory of it. So I'm going to create a two variables which can hold the information for file path as well as file name. So to copy the file path, you can go to source main resources, and from here, right click on the file out and then copy this path, cancel it. And if we wanted to use this as a out, I'm going to do one thing. I will remove this folder, but I'm still providing the file path as after the file, there is the out directory. And then I'm going to use the set variable for file name. So this file name is going to be suppliers details. Use the file. So if the file module is not available, you use the add modules and drag and drop that particular module into here. So now I'm going to use the file module and then within this write operation. So within the write operation, you can use the connector configuration also. So in connector configuration, enable this connection and you can configure the working directory. So this is going to be your common working directory for the entire operations. So wherever you are going to use this file configuration, you can choose this as the main working directory. But I'm having some issues within this Mac. I'm not going to use the working directory here. I'm going to use the file path directly. And I'm going to provide this path, enable the fx and use the vars dot file path and then concatenate with file name. And we have other properties as well. So we have the content property. So whatever the content that is there before this write operation, the same content will be written into the file. Get suppliers and write to file. And another property is create parent directories true. So whenever we are mentioning it as true, if that parent directory is not available, then it will create a parent directory and then it will proceed with the operation to write the file into that particular location. And write mode, we are mentioning it as overwrite. So if the file is already available, then it is going to overwrite the information. For example, I'm going to keep it as it is. And then we want to perform this activity in the asynchronous mode. We don't want it as a synchronous mode. Here use a logger. file process completed. And after that, I want to return the file name to the service. So use a transform message. And within this transform message, I want to mention the file name as well as the payload content. File name. We have a file name within the variable file name, and you can mention location. That's the file path. And after that, I want to mention what is the payload that is written into the file. Save the changes and then deploy it. So we are referring the database suppliers flow and then creating a file path variable as well as file name variable and sending that information to the asynchronous scope to write a file data. And then after that, we are having a transform message, which is going to return the file path as well as the location and also the content or the payload. Application is deployed. We will test it from the Postman. So our operation is file write, send a request. 1 second, file write suppliers. Yeah, now we can see that we have the file name, supplier details and location is file out. This is the payload. As of now, we have not transformed the payload. So it is a JSON data. Take the file in the source main resources. Go to source main resources and click on refresh. And here we can check that the out directory was not created earlier. Since the out directory was not created earlier, but even though it is not there, we have provided a property value like create parent directories to true. And that is the reason it created the directory and then it is placing a file into this location. Open the file. And here we will verify the result. So it is having an information of JSON data. But if we want to store any other kind of data, then we have to transform the data and then write into that particular operation. So we can do that in two ways. So within asynchronous scope, we can set a transform message and assign the operation. Otherwise, within this file write operation itself, we can use the content transformation for the mapping. Here we are mentioning headers true and we will write the data as CSV. So we are not configuring any other properties. So I am deploying the changes and we'll see instead of JSON data, it should have a CSV data. So CSV data is the comma separator. And we have provided the operation like overwrite operation. So the existing data should be replaced. Test the operation. Headers is not valid. Okay, we need to provide header, not headers. Header equal to true. Send a new request. We are receiving the JSON data on the service. Cannot coerce array to string. So this result set array of records, it was unable to convert into a CSV data. So for that, we'll check what is an issue. We have payload object. So since it is an object data, we need to mention the columns as well. So payload dot result set one. We'll check that payload here. Yeah, it is having a payload dot result set one. So it is able to write the information of arrays of records, but since it is an object information, it was unable to transform the data from JSON to CSV. For that, we are using a payload dot result set one, and it is going to write that information. And here, whatever the column names or field names are here, it is going to use the same column names as a headers. Send a new request again, and we'll check now. Yeah, the operation is successful. Refresh this folder and open the suppliers details. And here, if you see, earlier there was a JSON data, and that JSON data is replaced with this comma separated values. And here we have a Jeep last updated by, which is the columns information or column names from the database tables. And this database tables information is coming as the headers, since we have represented the header value as true. And we have a values like zip, and after that particular value, we have a comma. This is a separator. If we are going to specify any separator, then the separator will be used, particular separator. And after that, we have information timestamp, and also here we have HB SmartSoft solution like HB SmartSoft comma solutions. In that case, how the information has to return, because we are saying that every field is a comma separated. And if we are going to provide this as a comma separated and without quote values, then it is going to read this HB SmartSoft. Then it is going to read this HB SmartSoft as a one field or one column value, and it is going to create a problem. And for that purpose, we need to use the quote values. And for example, if we are going to provide use quote values, that means it is going to by defaultly add this field column as HB SmartSoft, comma solutions within the quotations, double quotes. And to provide these quotations, whether it is a double quotes or forward slash, we can use that by using quotes. So I'm going to update this supplier information from our update supplier service. I have saved this information in the collections. So you can also save the collections so that you can re-verify it later. DB operation and then update supplier. So we want to update the supplier. What is the supplier number here? Supplier one. I want to update supplier one. And the value should be HP SmartSoft Solutions. Send a request. So supplier is updated successfully. Now we are going to receive the information again. Use the write operation. Replace editor content. We are going to send a new request and then reopen the file. So here, if you observe, we have this HP SmartSoft, and then after that, there is a escape colon or backward slash, and then after that, we have a comma. So if we have this kind of information, we need to make sure that we are enclosing the data. Otherwise, we need to use this backward slash and then we need to construct this as the escape character and we have to read this entire value as one field column. Here I am going to provide the quote values. So quote values should be true. That means we are going to enclose that information within the quotes. And if we want that quote values to be something else other than the double quotes, then we need to use the quote equal to particular key. I am just using the value here as colon and we will just observe how the information will be enclosed. We will send a new request. And here we will check the supplier details. I'm closing this file and reopening the file. So we will check here. So it is having a headers information and after that it is having a colon and then the value. That means it is having an enclosure with the colon which we have specified the value as quote. And we are going to observe the supplier name value. And supplier name value, even though there is a comma, it is being considered as one field value and enclosed in the colon values. So if we do not specify this code, then it is going to defaultly consider double quotes. And we are going to see another operation. As of now, we have three suppliers information and a header. Now we are going to use append operation. Since the file was already there, then I am going to use append operation. And here I wanted to remove this quote value. Redeploy the changes. I'm closing the file and I'm going to send a new request. Reopen the file. Now, if we see, we have headers information here and also on line number 5 as well. And on line number 2, we have the supplier information enclosed in the colon value. And on line number 6, we have the information enclosed in the double quotes. And we also observe the supplier name here. And this supplier name is having a comma separated value, but it is enclosed in the double quotes. In this way, we can achieve this comma separated values to be write into a file and that can be accessed and processed in another application. And here we need to observe one more thing, like whenever we are appending the information, we don't need to specify this column name every time. I mean to say headers, we don't have to specify every time whenever we are going to append the data. So for that purpose, we can check whether we want to append the data or we want to create the data. So we are going to have a condition like if the file is already available, then you can write. If the file is already available, then you are going to append the data. If the file is not there, then you are going to create a new file. Or if you want to override the file, then that is fine. Whether you can have the headers as well as you can ignore the headers as well. And in our third scenario, I'm going to use the write mode as create new, and I'm going to remove this header value and setting it as false. We will see how it is going to behave. application is deployed, send a request. So we have received a success response for this service, for a REST service, and we will check the operation. So in our asynchronous, we are writing a file like cannot write to path, and well, let us check. Here we have a file out operation because it already exists, and write mode is create new. So that means whenever that file is already available on that particular location, and it is still trying to create a new file with the same file name, and it is throwing an exception like file already exists. So we need to make sure that we are creating a new file either with the different file stamp or with a different file name instead of creating the same file name. If we have chosen the create new operation, I'm going to clear this. And here I'm going to use the keyword now as date time. And then I want to create this file as CSV. So we have supplier details file, but we are not deleting this as of now. So this file still exists, and we are going to create a new file every time with a new timestamp. Since we have provided the value as date time, it is going to use the date timestamp and then with a .csv extension. Send a new request. And here we see there is no failure in the console. Refresh this folder. And if we see here, it is now created with supplier details and with the timestamp, and the extension is .csv. Open this file. Yeah. Within this new file, we don't have any headers or columns information that we have seen in the supplier details file. So this is up to the business requirement based on the contract between the two applications, how we want to write the data and how they are going to process it. So in this way, we can perform the all operations like append, create new, and overwrite operations. And also you can verify by choosing the create parent directory set to false. We have set it to false, and I'm going to remove this folder now. So that our first use case will be done. And here we are mentioning that parent directories should be already available. Otherwise, we are not going to proceed with the operation. Since this is an asynchronous scope, our main suppliers information returning to the postman is not failing. Send a new request and then observe the result. Okay. Now it is trying to write a file into this with the .csv, but it is failing. It is having an exception like file illegal path. So in this way, you can write and throw the exceptions, and once this exception is thrown, you can perform that other activity within the exception handler. So that is, we are going to use these file operations, then it is going to throw the file namespace exceptions with the identified illegal path or file already exists. So these kind of exceptions will be thrown. And within interview, they are going to ask like how and what are the operations that you have performed and what exceptions have been occurred to you and how did you resolve it. And also, if that particular exception has occurred, then what is that you are going to do and how you are going to inform to the business team, or are you going to send an email? So this is all up to the business process, how we wanted to proceed. So that can be configured within the exception handler. So we can create that out directory within the file structure, and then you can perform the operation whenever we wanted to create, if there are parent directories only. Otherwise, you can choose the option as true if we want to create a new parent directories as well. And now we are going to move to the second use case. Our second use case we will discuss. Select, instead of select, we need to mention get the supplier details from database and create a supplier data into file. And also here we are mentioning that provide the file name and location details as a response to service. And file write operation should be asynchronous. This is our first use case. And our second use case is that we are going to prepare a new set of suppliers information, and that supplier records we wanted to create into a database. That means we are going to create an inbound interface or integration from system B to system A. So they are going to mention we are placing a suppliers information, new suppliers records information on a particular location. So whenever there is a new file, you have to pick that file and then you have to process it and then send that, create that information into the database. So this is our new requirement. And once you have processed the data, then you can archive that file into a different directory. I'm going to use a new flow. So for this, we are going to use file operation. But whenever there is a new file or updated file, then we wanted to trigger the operation. The file operation should be on new or updated file instead of upload file. Okay, I have corrected it. And now we are going to read this particular file and we will check the different configuration properties. Here, if you see, we have a directory and we need to provide the path and the file name, which file name we have to read. And we have a matcher. So in this matcher, you can provide the configuration to filter the files, like if we are going to provide it like created since, so then it is going to pick up those files which are created after the date. Likewise, we have multiple configuration properties. For example, if we need to read only the CSV files in this particular flow, then you have to mention star.csv. So it can be anything before the .csv, but it has to end with the .csv extension. And if you want to mention the path expression also, then you can use the path pattern. I'm going to remove this. I am not going to configure the matcher now. And another option is watermark mode. So whenever this watermark mode is disabled, it means whenever there is a new file or updated file in that particular location, we need to pick up that file and we have to process it. Or if you want to provide any created timestamp, then it is going to perform an operation like first it will read a file from the location and it is going to store that previous file timestamp, created timestamp date, and it is going to verify that timestamp with the newly created files. And if it is greater than that, then only it is going to process the files. And if it is the modified timestamp, then you can provide the modified timestamp. And we have the scheduling strategy like fixed frequency and clock. Now we are going to proceed with fixed frequency schedule. Like I want to process it for 5 minutes. And if you, and one more thing is like start delay means once the file is placed into particular location, then it is going to wait for that particular time and then it is going to proceed further. And time unit, I'm going to mention it as 5 minutes. And here you can specify the post-processing action, like whether you want to delete the file. If you want to delete the file, you can mention true. And if you want to move this file to a different directory, you can mention here. So we are going to configure this into a archive directory. So once the action is done, then I want to move that file into a archive directory. So as it is, I mean, the file should be with the same name and I wanted to move it. If you want to rename the file name, then you can use the rename to expression. And here, post action when failed, that means if you want to stop the process of moving the file, then you can use false. Or if you, even though the process is failed, if you want to move that file, you can choose true. And one more thing, here we can mention the MIME type and what kind of data we are going to retrieve. For example, CSV data, and we can add the parameters. Likewise, whenever we were writing the data into the file, we have mentioned the values like whether it is a quote values or it is having separator and what kind of data it is having, whether it is having any headers. For example, we can mention it is going to contain the header information, that means column value, and it is going to have a quote information. For example, if it is having any, you can add the quote value. What is the quote value that it is containing? If it is apart from the double quotes, you can specify it. Otherwise, it is not needed. And you can add another parameter, streaming, if it is a streaming data or not. So likewise, you can add multiple properties or parameters to this file whenever we are going to read this file from that location. So once we receive the file, we are going to log the information. New suppliers, data, and payload. So this is our payload, and we are going to use the transform message. And within the transform message, we are going to convert the information into JSON data. Logger, in this logger, I am mentioning new suppliers JSON data because we are transforming the data into a JSON format. And after this, we can perform the insert operation. So to perform the insert operation, within the file, it can have multiple suppliers information. So we need to use for each. So for each supplier, we want to insert the data into a database. So we already have one operation and flow to insert the data into database. So we are going to make use of it. Search for the flow. Post supplier operations flow. But to this post supplier operations flow, before sending the data, we need to know what kind of data it will accept. So go to that suppliers flow. And here we have an example, insert supplier. And it is going to have the payload information. Let us check. I'm going to use the transform message here because we wanted to convert each supplier information. Use JSON. So we need to send the supplier number. I'm going to do a transformation. I'm going to stop the recording and then I will explain. So for each scope, we are defining the payload as supplier number, and this supplier number is going to read a value of payload.supplier number, which we are going to provide these values or column names within the CSV file. So we are going to create a CSV file with these field names or header names. And we have information, supplier number, supplier name, address, zip, created by and last updated by. And within this flow, we have to check it is going to accept that information. So I'm going to make a few changes here. Instead of directly providing connectors API, I want to check payload.created by. If that value is not available, then I want to default to connectors API. Here also in same way, I want to check payload last updated by. And default value connectors API. And I am leaving the creation date and last updation date to the system date. We have this information and we need to create a new record. So within this new flow, we are going to wait for a new file or updated file, and we are reading the file, and then we are transforming into a JSON format. Since the file is going to containing multiple suppliers information, I'm using a for each, and for each supplier, I'm transforming the information into a required format. So reading the files and then transforming supplier number to supplier number, and then calling the flow reference, which can insert the data into database. Now we are going to create a file. So in folder, right click on it, create a file, give a file name as new underscore suppliers dot CSV. Open with the text editor. And here we are going to write that information. We have supplier number and then supplier name, address, zip, and also created by and last updated by. So we have two suppliers information. Save these records and stop the service. We're going to debug the application so that we can verify the application, how it is processing and how the data is being read from the location. So we are reading the files from the, sorry, one second. Here we need to provide in folder. Since we need to read the files from in folder and move the files into archive folder once the processing is done. So I'm going to redeploy the changes. Since we have not added the breakpoint, the process was completed. Let us observe the logs. So we have new suppliers data in the form of CSV, and it is having supplier 6 and supplier 7. And then we have converted into a JSON format. It is having suppliers information array of records. And if you see here, the headers are being converted into the key value pairs. So supplier number and the value is supplier 6. And we are going to correlate with the CSV data. So supplier number 6 column is having the records, supplier 6 and supplier 7. And then we can see that information is converting into a JSON format, having supplier number as key and value is supplier 6 for one record and supplier 7 as second record. And it is going to process the post suppliers operation, having a metadata. And within metadata, if we see, it is having supplier 6 information and also supplier 7 information. It is processing both the records. And then we will check for the final output. So requirements. Okay. We have not printed that whether supply creation was successfully created or not. So for that, we are going to make a small change. And now we will add the debug logger as well. So here, go to reference flow. And we have the supplier information here. And whether it is created or failed. We are going to use that and gather that information in the for each. Add a logger. And within this logger, we are going to mention the payload, response payload. After supplier creation call payload. And we have this information. Since we need to understand whether the supplier information created successfully or not, you can use that aggregation, like by creating the variables and adding the response that has come from the flow reference, and you can concatenate or aggregate the result, and you can use it in the after transfer message that we have discussed in the scopes for each scopes. And so now we are going to verify one more information, like whether that new suppliers are created or not. And also, since the file is processed, we are going to refresh the in folder and verify in the archive folder. Yeah, so the file is deleted from in folder and moved to a archive folder. We will open this file and check. If we see, we can see the suppliers information here. And whenever it is going to move the files, if it is having the same file name, then it is going to create a problem. Like the file name cannot be moved since already existed like that. So I'm going to use suppliers.csv instead of CSV. Now I'm going to create a different file. And this file name, I'm going to rename it as new suppliers 1. I'm not providing the extension here. Stop the service. And also we can verify whether suppliers are created or not. I'm sending a request here before the application was stopped. And we can see that supplier 6 and supplier 7 are created successfully in the database. Since we were not providing the status value and it was not able to create the status or update the status. And in our enhancement, we are going to add the status and also provide the value. So new suppliers, open this file. Here add status. This file into the file in folder once the application is started. Since we want to insert the status information also, I'm going to add in the insert syntax as well. Status. So here we should provide the column name, and that value we are going to read from the input parameters. And if this value is not available, then we can leave it as inactive instead of leaving it as blank. So for one supplier, I'm going to provide the information, and for another supplier, I'm leaving the information as blank. So for supplier 9, the record should create with active status, and supplier 10, the record should create with inactive status. Now I am also making a change that it should run for every minute. So frequency 1 minute. save all the changes, and then deploy the application. Debug the application. Application is deployed, but the files are not in the in location. If we check here, there are no files. Hence, the flow was not started. And now we are going to place the file into this in folder. So whenever there is a next run in the next minute, then it is going to pick up this file and it will process. Yeah, 1 minute is completed. Now it has picked up the file. This is our CSV information. And it is now we are converting it to the JSON format. So we have status information as well. Send the values to for each scope. So in our for each scope, we can see it is going to loop for every supplier record. And this supplier record, we are transforming into the needed format for that particular flow. We are providing supplier number and every information. In this, since we have not added the status in this transform message, status information is not going to send to this flow. Hence, for both the records, it is going to add a inactive information. Created successfully. We can see that in the example. After supplier creation call, supplier creates successfully, create the console, and we will test from the supplier's information service. If we observe here, we have the record supplier 9 with inactive status since we have not sent the status, and we will check for supplier 10. Yeah, supplier 10 also added and it is having a status inactive. So in this way, we can read a file from a location and then we can transform the records and then we are going to insert the records into the database. So we have two-way communication or both inbound process or outbound process by using file communication. So our second use case is that we need to create a file in archive folder with the timestamp. So for that purpose, with original file name, we need to archive file with the original file name plus timestamp. So for that purpose, we are going to make few changes and in the operations also in post supplier operations, instead of logging the attributes information, we have logging payload 2 times. So make that change. And also in the insert supplier operations flow, insert DB operation, we are making a change like if the input value for created by is empty, if it is going to pass empty string or null value, then we are going to default to connected API. That means we have a check. And if the value is available, then we are going to populate the value. And it is applicable for the last updated by also. And for status, we are going to just check if the payload status is null, then we are going to default to inactive. This is a change in the post supplier operations. And within the file upload file and within the file read operations flow, we are going to make a change in the for each scope. And here we are populating the field if the value is not blank. That means if it is empty string or null value, then we are not going to populate the value. So that from our read operations flow, the value for status will be sent only if it is available. and we are going to make few more changes. In our post-processing actions, we are moving the file to a archive folder. But if we want to get that original file name, we cannot access that within the source operation. So you can rename it to a different file, like some value, that hard-coded value and the timestamp. But if you want to get the original file name and add the timestamp, we cannot do it in the post-processing action within the source. For that, I am removing this move to directory, and I'm going to use the move file name operation, and we are going to create the attributes for it. Create a variable. Variable name is file path, and file path, it is available in attributes information. So once the flow is triggered, we can get that original file name information by using attributes keyword. Attributes dot file name. Okay, this is the file path. Get the file path. Create one more variable for file name, and here we are going to store attributes dot file name, and another variable to hold the information for target path. Target path. So this target path we have to copy. Right click on the folder, click on properties, copy, and then mention here. So this will be our target path. Here we are going to access the file path. So this file path will contain the file name as well, because it is going to get the information from the attributes. And if we want to have a separate file name, so you can directly access the file name from the attributes information. And we are also defining the target path. So to this path, we want to move the file. And this information we are going to use in this move operation. So source path along with the file name we have, and we are going to mention the target path. And here we are going to mention the rename to. If we are not going to provide the rename to, then it is going to move the file with the same file name. And we are mentioning file name. And that file name is the original file name, and also concatenating with hyphen. And concatenating means we are going to add the file name like file name hyphen and the timestamp. And we have a timestamp in the format year, month, day, and here HH means 24 hours format, and minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. And if you want to add time zone, you can use .z. And we are also going to add the matcher here, edit inline. And matcher we are representing, it needs to process only .csv files. Save the changes and deploy the application. So we are going to prepare two files, one with new suppliers underscore one and new suppliers one underscore CSV. Text editor. Have the supplier information as 20 and another supplier information 21. So this supplier information we are going to store in the database 21. Save the changes, and once the application is deployed, then we are going to move these files into the in folder. We have two files, one without .csv extension and another file with CSV extension. Okay, I have cleared the logs. So to verify the logs from our system location, you can go to the specified location. So for that, you can use Finder. So from here, if you are in Mac, go to Applications and Anypoint Studio, Package Contents, and here go to Eclipse Plugins. And within this plugin, you can go to the specified runtime version. So within this, we need to go to the 4.4 runtime version tooling server. Open this folder and here open the mule folder. Here we have the applications that are deployed within our local machine, and you can also verify the logs. So within this logs, our logs will be deployed with the API name. So open this API name log, and here we are going to check for the latest logs. Here new supplies data. This is our CSV file, and then we have a JSON data. This is our JSON. So we need to create this information with connectors API for last updated by, and status should be inactive. That we will check from the supplier service, get supplier service, and supplier is created successfully. So in this way, we can verify the logs from the, in this way, we can verify our logs. Even though we have cleared logs in our console, we can go to our portal location of the Anypoint Studio and we can verify the logs. And so in Windows application also, you can open the logs from the physical location where the software like Anypoint Studio is saved. And from there, you can open the logs by going to the runtime engine and by going into the plugins and runtime engine, and you can open the logs. So we have verified it. Now we are going to check for the service. So I'm going to run the supplier service and I will check for new supplier information, supplier 20 and 21. Search for 20. Okay. So supplier 20 is not available, but supplier 21 seems to be there. Yeah. Supplier 21 is created with the GP information and last updated by, since we have not provided value, it is created with connectors API, and let us check the status. Status is inactive since we have not provided status also. So this is about the information, but our supply 20 is not created. We will check for that. Here we are going to refresh the file in folder location, and that .csv file is processed and it is deleted from the in folder. We will check the archive folder as well. And if we observe within the archive folder, there is one file with a new information like new suppliers underscore one.csv file and with the timestamp, because we are renaming the original file name with the timestamp. And it is processed only CSV files because we have mentioned a matcher condition to process the file name pattern.csv. This is how we can enhance our services and read only particular files. We'll just see what are the use cases that we have discussed right now. So our first use case is to get all the suppliers information from the database and write into a file. And the second use case, we have a file at a location with a new suppliers information. And those supplier information we wanted to insert into the system A, that is the database. And we also need to move that file once it is processed, and that file name should be renamed with the timestamp into your archive folder. These are the two cases. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe.